Okay, the final item of business this evening is a members' business debate on motion 16539 in the name of Maggie Chapman on ending destitution in Scotland, a roadmap for policymakers. The debate will be concluded without any questions being put, but I invite members wishing to participate to press the request to speak buttons. And I call on Maggie Chapman to open the debate. Around 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Being on the streets almost destroyed me. Walking with no sleep. I just sit on a bench by the river. It was -6, then -2 in the morning when the sun shone. I am not safe here. I can't sleep because tomorrow, what is coming? These are the words of Sophia, Kunal and Sahai, 3 people who came to Scotland looking for a better life. 3 people who suffered violent abuse, hunger, ill health, destitution. Presiding Officer, it is for Sophia, Kunal and Sahai, and the far too many other people like them that I speak today. I'm honoured and grateful to have the opportunity to bring this issue, literally a matter of life and death, one of the most foundational human rights, to the Chamber this afternoon. I'd like to thank all those who have worked so generously, so meticulously and so courageously, including iSphere, the Joseph Rowntree Foundation and other members of the Fairway Scotland Partnership, and of course Professor Jen Ang. It is thanks to you that we are here today, and I hope that we can do justice to your integrity, expertise and vision. I thank colleagues from across the Chamber for supporting this motion and debate, and for our discussion at yesterday's Migration Cross-Party Group. When we say that someone is destitute, we mean that they are shut out from the simplest things that make human lives possible, usually from food and clothing, often from shelter and home. When we think of destitution, we think of distance, about places torn apart by conflict or disaster, about histories of dispossession and famine. But there are people living in Scotland today who are destitute. There are people dying in destitution here in Scotland right now. What do we call that reality? If there was nothing we could do, we would call it a tragedy. But if we could make change, and we do not, if we could open those doors to basic food, to clothes, to shelter, and we keep them shut, what do we call it then? We call it injustice. We call it, as it is, a breach of fundamental human rights. We call it, I believe, collective shame. The Scottish Government has acted, and I commend the work that it has begun, both following the work of the Equality, Human Rights and Civil Justice Committee, a committee on which I'm proud to serve, and with COSLA in producing the Ending Destitution Together strategy. That strategy has enabled the life-saving work of the Fairway Scotland Partnership in Aberdeen, Glasgow and Edinburgh. But it's not enough. Too many doors are still closed, still locked. But we now have the keys. Jen Ang's legal briefing is clear and challenging. It sets out the ways in which people in Scotland are denied access to basic provisions, through intentional and direct exclusion, through indirect mechanisms, and through lack of information, education, courage and care. And it shows how the Scottish Government, supported by all of us as critical friends, can act to open those locked doors and to make real the rights of our destitute neighbours. I'm asking the Scottish Government this afternoon to commit to 5 tangible actions, all of them within devolved competence. Number 1, widen access to universal services and benefits with a systematic review to ascertain exactly where and how that can be done. Universal should mean just that. Initiatives that are meant to reduce inequality and poverty must include people who are stranded by the widest inequality, struck by the deepest destitution. That includes people with no recourse to public funds or restricted or uncertain eligibility, what we know of as NRPF-RE. Number 2, resource Fairway Scotland sufficiently so it can respond to the real level of need across Scotland. We know that this model is working. It is opening doors to support, accommodation, advice and cash payments for essential needs. But it simply doesn't have the capacity, at the moment, to help everyone who needs it. Number 3, create a new Scottish crisis or hardship grant, using powers that the Scottish Government already has under the 2016 Scotland Act. This could fill the widest gaps, give emergency help to those in desperate need where no other financial or practical support is out there. When you slip between the provisions of existing law, the fall can be fast and fatal. Number 4, urgently increase funding for housing, immigration and asylum legal aid. The UK Government has said that it will do this in England and Wales, so we have no excuse not to do the same here. Much of Scotland is a legal aid desert, especially for people whose lives and futures depend on being able to access justice. And number 5, engage positively and robustly with the UK Government about the NRPF system. We want, of course, to see it abolished altogether. It doesn't do what its makers intended. It doesn't reduce immigration. It doesn't reflect what most people would consider to be fair. And it doesn't save money. It's a brutal weapon of the hostile environment, raining blows of hunger, cold, fear and isolation on those with least to protect them. But until it's gone, Scotland must minimise its harm. That means advocating for clarity, transparency and the removal of Scottish benefits and assistance from its scope. We are not here this afternoon simply as representatives of our parties. We are here as human beings, as representatives of a Scotland that cares, that welcomes, that remembers shared histories of destitution. A Scotland that knows of the utter poverty that takes away agency, choice and hope, even before it takes lives, years before their time. Hearts starve as well as bodies, as all feminists and socialists know. So this is a joint endeavour, a shared opportunity to do something that will make a direct difference to those in the bitterest of needs. We can all play our part. We can all speak more loudly, urging the UK Government to be the transformational change that we know is needed, working with our allies in the UK and devolved Parliament to make that case, working with our councillors to maximise support and services at local authority level. And most of all, here and now, we call on the Scottish Government to act on the recommendations of Jen Ang's briefing. Presiding Officer, we have a roadmap to show the way ahead. But do we have the integrity to follow it? For Sahey, Sophia, Kunal and all other people facing destitution in Scotland, we must. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Chapman. Before we move to the open debate, just to alert the Chamber to the fact that there is a lot of interest in participating in this debate. Given the time already, I would be very grateful for members to stick to their speaking time allocation. We'll get everybody in, but we may need to extend the debate. And with that plea, I call first Marie McNair to be followed by Tim Eagle. Up to 4 minutes. Ms McNair.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I congratulate Maggie Chapman for securing this important debate? And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Homeless Network Scotland and Heriot Watt University for their briefings, and the Scottish Refugee Council for all they do. In the 21st century, no one should be living in destitution. But, Presiding Officer, the Home Office hostile environment continues to see destitution thrive. No recourse to public funds needlessly prevents people from accessing welfare support, resulting in no safety net should they face difficulty. It leaves people homeless, hungry and at risk of exploitation, and these people may have already fled horrific situations. The Labour Government promised change, but instead basic rights continue to be denied. New research from iSpear found that the average income of those impacted are exceptionally low at just £40 per week, and also a third reported no income at all in the last month. They also found that hunger and skipping meals were the norm, and the use of charities for essentials like food, toiletries and clothing is exceptionally high. To put this into perspective, Presiding Officer, I want to tell you about Kunal's story. Kunal arrived in UK at age 26 as a student fleeing homophobic persecution. He claimed asylum without success and was evicted from his accommodation. Kunal was forced to sleep rough. He was attacked and threatened with a knife. He went hungry and took exploitative cash-in-hand work just to eat. A turning point came when Kunal contacted the Scottish Refugee Council. They helped him secure support to submit a fresh application, and he was granted Home Office accommodation but afraid of being declined again. Kunal knows returning to his country of origin is too dangerous, but then again he said, "I'm not safe here." This is one of many heartbreaking stories, and this is a matter of justice, of compassion and humanity. No one should be put in this situation. I am therefore grateful and welcome the positive steps the Scottish Government and COSLA have taken to reduce destitution. The Ending Destitution Together strategy, developed by the Scottish Government and COSLA in 2021, aims to ensure that people living in communities across Scotland do not experience destitution associated with immigration status. A crucial part of this is the Fairway Scotland partnership. It has been a lifeline for so many, and I thank everybody involved for everything they do. I also welcome the Scottish Government and COSLA are currently undergoing a review of the Ending Destitution Together strategy to identify a refreshed delivery plan. Presiding Officer, as stated by Homeless Network Scotland in their briefing, there is no credible evidence that hostile environment policies, including no recourse to public funds, have achieved the aims set out by the UK Government. A change to this UK policy could remedy the situation overnight, and clearly, as an independent country, we could finally have control over our own immigration policy, able to introduce a system which values and respects people. However, I was interested to read about the possible action that could be taken now to tackle destitution as detailed in the report. One example being widening access to universal services and to welfare benefits for those with no recourse to public funds. I would be keen to hear from the Minister to outline the Scottish Government's position on these recommendations. Presiding Officer, destitution is a result of injustice. It is a result of policies that entrench hardship. Therefore, it is up to us to call these policies out and push for action. We must stand with those facing destitution and ensure that no one is left behind. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call Tim Eagle to be followed by Richard Leonard, up to 4 minutes.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Let me begin by noting some areas of common ground on this issue. First and foremost, in the wider debate of immigration, it is far too easy to dehumanise people, particularly those who are in vulnerable situations and those who are leaving destabilised nations in search of a better life. It is right that we have a proper and robust asylum process for people who find themselves in such situations, but that does not mean that it is always perfect. Whoever is in power at a UK level should continuously monitor that system to ensure it works effectively and efficiently, but at the same time ensure that those at the heart of the process are treated with dignity. I also support a controlled form of illegal immigration, particularly where there is a need to fill skill shortages, for example. Indeed, it was the previous Conservative UK Government who listened to the concerns expressed for the soft fruit sector and expanded the seasonal worker scheme to address that issue. I also agree that the Scottish Government can do more on this issue if it chooses to do so, and this is supported by the extensive recommendation in Jen Ang's report and the recommendations in the Joseph Rowntree Foundation's report that are referenced in the motion. We hear it far too often in debates such as this that involve issues that have a reserved element and a devolved element. While I may not agree with many of the elements of the report that Maggie Chapman refers to in her motion, what it does show is that the Scottish Government has the power to do things differently in a variety of different policy areas, and that is ultimately a question for the Cabinet Secretary to address today. With all that said, it is vital that both of Scotland's governments are abundantly clear that those who wish to come to the UK to live and work do so through legal routes. Whether there are economic migrants coming to the UK for opportunities to study and work, or whether they are refugees coming to the UK for a better life. The Scottish Conservatives... yeah, absolutely.
Maggie Chapman, briefly.
I thank the member for taking my intervention. Would he describe a legal route, please, that somebody who's fleeing oppression from, for example, war-torn Yemen has opened to them?
Tim Eagle.
I have to be honest, I'm not completely up to speed with all the different elements, but I think what we have to do is make sure, and I'm just about to come on to this in my speech, that there is a safe legal route to do so. With all that said, whether they are the Scottish Conservatives believe that migration is important, but that it must be controlled and it must be legal. The motion and Jen Ang's report both fail to address or even mention illegal migration, and we cannot shy away from that issue as part of the wider debate. The previous UK Conservative government took steps to address this issue, and in particular, it reduced the number of illegal migrants entering the UK from small boats. The reason I say that is because not only are vulnerable people still being exploited by the people smuggling gangs, but lives are being put at risk. More action is needed to reduce the number of people who try to enter the UK illegally, and equally, more needs to be done, and importantly, More needs to be done by the UK and Scottish governments to dismantle the business models of those who seek to profit from illegal migration. Deputy Presiding Officer, this is just one element of, I recognise, a much wider debate that is needed on the issue of immigration. That debate cannot be a taboo subject, and it must be open, frank and respectful if we are to properly address this very important issue.
Thank you. I now call Richard Leonard to be followed by Eleanor Whittam. Up to 4 minutes. Mr Leonard.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. And can I thank Maggie Chapman for leading this debate tonight and congratulate her on her recent election as the next rector of the University of Dundee. Linton Kwesi Johnson, in his poem All We Do in Is Defending, warns, all oppression can do is bring passion to the heights of eruption. And what we are witnessing in the asylum system in this country is state-sponsored oppression, state-sponsored homelessness, state-sponsored destitution, destitution by design. These are deliberate political choices, not public finance or economic choices, but political choices, and those responsible should hang their heads in shame. It even has its own recognised abbreviation, NRPF, no recourse to public funds. It is even statutory, first established in legislation in the 1971 Immigration Act. It has been a standard visa condition since 1980, reinforced by statute in the Immigration and Asylum Act of 1999 and doubled down on in the Social Security Consequential Amendments Regulations of 2000. When I met the Scottish Refugee Council on Monday, they told me that it means no access to housing benefit, universal credit, child credit, but so much more. And reporting from the front line, they said that there was anger, desperation and helplessness. No wonder there are so many migrant families suffering from poor physical and mental health. 2/3 of those seeking safety and refuge are not permitted to work. So at the point of the survey carried out for the 2024 report, Destitution by Design, 93% of participants were experiencing homelessness. 97% were destitute. 82% reported incomes of less than £60 a week. A third of all those surveyed reported that they had no income at all. They were 8 times more likely than in any other destitute cohort to be in temporary accommodation and 6 times more likely to be sleeping rough. As the Scottish Refugee Council told me, they face violence and crime, and especially in the case of women, exploitation and prostitution. This is a stain on our society, and it is going on today, tonight, in this city, across this country, under our gaze. We cannot be bystanders, which is why this new report by Jenang is so important, because it does not concentrate on what we cannot do under devolution, but on what we can do under devolution. So we can provide free access to public transport. We can act under the Social Work Scotland Act 1968 to create a Scottish Hardship Fund. We can ensure that those in need get access to legal aid. We can provide targeted housing and homelessness support. We can ensure that there is not just access to primary and secondary healthcare free at the point of need in theory, but in practice as well. And we can improve access to further and higher education. And yes, we can send a clear message to the UK Labour Government, which says that it is committed to the continuous review of NRPF, that it should not only support these measures, it should lift the pernicious ban on the right to work, and it should scrap the no recourse to public funds rules completely. If they do not act, and if we do not act, the violence of this targeted austerity will continue to drive up the toll of human misery, destitution, sickness and death even. We can oppose this hostile environment. We can resist the politics of Nigel Farage and his imitators. We can move from defending alone to erupting with passion to break these walls down. We need to win this argument. We need to act. If we do not, if we give up, history will not forgive us.
Thank you. I now call Eleanor Whittam to be followed by Carol Mochan. Up to 4 minutes.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I would like to start by putting on record my deep thanks to Maggie Chapman for securing this debate and bringing to the Chamber this urgent issue of destitution experienced by those who find themselves classed as having no recourse to public funds or who have restricted eligibility to those public funds. What we're talking about is having your ability to access sufficient food, shelter, care and opportunity denied or savagely curtailed, destitute by design. I also want to express my deep gratitude to Professor Jen Ang for everything that she has done over the years, but also for her recent legal briefing publication, Ending Destitution in Scotland, a roadmap for policymakers, commissioned by iSphere and the Joseph Rowntree Foundation as part of the Fairway Scotland Partnership. And I would point members to my register of interests as a member of Simon Community Scotland's Women's Connect Hub Development Board. Simon Community Scotland are an integral part of the Fairway Scotland Partnership, and indeed the Connect Hub provides person-centred trauma-informed support to women experiencing homelessness or insecure housing, some of whom find themselves with no or limited access to public funds. Deputy Presiding Officer, I became acutely aware of the flaws in our safety net scaffolding many years ago whilst working in a women's refuge. Our Women's Aid group were supporting 2 young Polish mothers who had fled domestic abuse, but whom the DWP and local council were telling us had no recourse to public funds due to being unable to satisfy the habitual residency test coming from what were then still considered ascension states and not fully within the EU. Again, destitute by design. We had 2 women in their 20s for whom English was their second language, with several young children, including a baby, who had not one penny to either of their names and only the clothes that they stood up in. All the agencies we would normally go to support women to access help through were closing their doors in our faces, and we ended up using money from our own pockets to buy essentials to bridge the immediate gap. Our Women's Aid Collective took the decision that, as an organisation dedicated to supporting women to live free from abuse, we would shoulder the financial burden and forego housing benefit and supporting people payments for the duration of their stay with us. It was either that or they returned to their abusers, and that was not an option for us. And I want to underline here today, in this place, just how difficult the next year was for us as a charity, but more so for those women and their kids. We lost tens of thousands of pounds in revenue, and if you know anything about the third sector, that is not a sustainable position to be in. But the alternative was unthinkable. Myself and my 2 refuge colleagues became experts in all things NRPF and challenged decision after decision made by institutions who never seemed to apply the law the same way twice. We got decisions overturned with regards to provision for the children, as we knew the local authority had discretion and also obligations. We dug deep ourselves to help feed and clothe the 2 families and searched out every type of support we could find for them, all the while trying to ensure the grapevine never got back to the abusers about their whereabouts. Eventually, Deputy Presiding Officer, we managed to help them secure all of the necessary information and proof that enabled them to successfully challenge the original decision that determined that they had no recourse to public funds. It wasn't backdated, though. But I won't ever forget the absolute joy and relief that was so very palpable in our refuge that day. That joy was replicated when both women moved out into their own tenancies, away from abuse, with the necessary social security scaffolding and access rights that we all take for granted. Both women went on to college and into employment. And more than a decade on, I have never, ever forgotten them. But the system should not be one that's so opaque and so punishing and so brutal. Direct and indirect discrimination should not be the norm. The route map to ending destitution is now black and white, and Maggie Chapman powerfully outlined its key steps today. And as a former COSLA Community Wellbeing spokesperson, I worked on the Ending Destitution Together strategy, and I'm glad to hear that it is being refreshed. But I urge the Scottish Government and the UK Government to work together to flex powers under devolution and to dispense with the hostile environment and finally deliver for this marginalised, maligned and terrified group of people. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Whittam. I now call Carol Mochan to be followed by Emma Roddick. Up to 4 minutes. Ms Mochan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I would like to start by thanking Maggie Chapman for bringing this really important debate to the Chamber and for the very powerful speech. It is paramount that we treat people arriving in Scotland as we would wish to be treated ourselves, and I hope this debate will go some way to achieving this. Being unable to claim adequate benefits for basic survival because of immigration status, and in many cases It's through a system we, and I mean by we, human beings set up these systems. And this system also, we have heard tonight, means that people are unable to work. So we put people in this position. We put people in this position. And it really shows that it is all of our responsibility to act on the recommendations made in the legal briefing by Professor Jen Ung. And that's at all levels of government. As others have said, this paper rightly challenges presumptions that reserved immigration law prevents specific groups from accessing support that would mitigate the harm they suffer at present. The paper presents workable solutions that national and local government can pursue to achieve immediate positive change. It's my view that it's our responsibility as human beings to seek solutions, not build barriers when others are suffering. This is why I welcome the report and the opportunity given to us by Maggie Chapman to speak tonight. The paper is a stark reminder of why we should review legislation and challenge assumptions about how laws are implemented. Many of the actions in the paper are within the abilities and devolved capacities of the government, so let's use the powers we have to actually help our fellow human beings. If I think of the most basic of needs, a home, everyone should have a home that meets their needs. This is the Scottish Government's vision. It is my vision, it is our vision, but that simply is not the case for so many people. So I urge the Scottish Government tonight to use the debate as a catalyst to work on some of the solutions laid out by Dr Jen Ung. For us to see the end to homelessness, we need more action. The paper details the desperate situation of so many people sleeping on Scotland's streets. I am urging all levels of government to act now. We have heard that 1 in 8 people with no recourse to public funds are sleeping rough currently, and more than half having reported sleeping rough last year. This needs immediate action. It's absolutely clear. Financial support for people who are living in these extreme levels of destitution can be made possible. It is the systems that we create which cause such suffering, and it is absolutely unacceptable. Evidence shows that a third of Fairway Scotland service users can go months with no income. Presiding Officer, in the short time I have left, I want to mention access to healthcare. It is no surprise that as a result of the barriers discussed, a major inequality is health and nutritional health of people. People who have limited or no access to shelter or housing and are not able to work or apply for benefits cannot gain access to basic food to maintain any level of health. Around 33% of those under these restrictions that we've been talking about tonight are more likely to be deprived of basic food, and this is in Scotland today. This has to be a concern in the here and now, but also for the longer-term health of any of these individuals. Access to healthcare for people with no recourse to public funds is at best muddled. There needs to be an end to the barriers there for people. People need to know that they can access healthcare at the point of need without fear and without fear of charges that they just so desperately can't afford. The paper references a number of areas the Scottish Government can look at, and I would really ask the Minister to make plans to discuss these with the Cabinet Secretary for Health as soon as possible. I know I'm running out of time, so I thank people for their commitments tonight.
Thank you very much, Ms Mochan. I now call Emma Ruddock to be followed by Patrick Harvey. Up to 4 minutes, Ms Ruddock.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I want to start by thanking Maggie Chapman for highlighting this report and bringing the debate this evening. Destitution deserves our attention and our efforts to address it any way we can. It's one of the most frustrating parts of devolution that we know destitution exists in Scotland and we're actively prevented from stopping it. I do not believe that the people who voted me in here want destitution to exist. I'm certain that they believe it's our duty to prevent it, and I'm less convinced that they know about the way that we are hamstrung by Westminster. I agree with Richard Leonard that we should do all that we can, but I point out too that what we can do for people in this situation can change with one order from the UK Government. If the UK Government doesn't like us providing free bus travel to people seeking asylum, the UK Government can stop it from happening. The cruelty of no recourse to public funds is highlighted in the way that it prevents the Scottish Government from using its own budget to help people who live in Scotland. And if you think about that, it is incredible, but that's the state of play. Such a scheme has no place in a civilised society, and I agree with Maggie Chapman that it should be abolished. During the Tories' time in power, I was constantly devastated and disgusted by the efforts of its ministers to make life as miserable as they possibly could for people seeking asylum, including children. Painting over murals in detention centres, using dehumanising language and storing people on barges as if they were indeed less than human. It's gutting that the Labour government now seems intent on giving an appearance of being at least as tough on immigration. Labour candidates now share graphics on social media promising to shut down asylum hotels. A government which should be abolishing the hostile environment is instead promoting it. A policy to reduce immigration to no end is incoherent. It's not going to serve Labour's other purported aims, not least driving economic growth. And in Scotland, we require more migration to support that growth. I find a lot of the recommendations in the report very interesting, and they're worth further debate, particularly around clarifying the definition of public funds in NRPF. Because part of me wonders if that's a rock that we want to lift in case some of the current support available turns out to be unwanted by the Home Office. The report itself points out that the approach of the Home Office in the past has been to add Scottish funds to the list without carrying out any engagement first with the Scottish Government, as happened with the Scottish Welfare Fund. Now, the Ending Destitution Together strategy is the correct approach. The Scottish Government working with COSLA and our incredible third sector to support people in any way possible. It is tough not to feel demoralised in the face of continued harshness towards those fleeing war and persecution and seeking sanctuary in the UK and Scotland. But my sincere hope is that we soon get the opportunity to do better here in Scotland, and I look forward to hearing the Minister's response to the debate.
Thank you, Ms Ruddock. I call Patrick Harvey to be followed by Faisal Chowdhury. Up to 4 minutes. Mr Harvey.
Presiding Officer, can I join others in thanking Maggie Chapman, not just for bringing this debate, but in particular for opening it with the words of some of the people most directly affected, voices which are so often unheard in this debate. And I'd also want to express my appreciation to Professor Jen Ang and to everyone who's contributed in any way, either to this report or other attempts to address the issue of ending destitution in Scotland. And I want to pause just for a moment at my first use of that word. We've all been talking about destitution in Scotland. It's 2025 in one of the wealthiest countries in the world, and we're debating whether to end destitution. That in itself should shock and shame us all. And it's worse still because this destitution isn't merely the result of reckless or complacent economic policies. There's a false but prevalent idea in much of our politics that poverty is a shame, but we can't do anything to really end it. It's a false but prevalent idea. This is worse. This is destitution deliberately created as a tool of policymakers who want this country to be a hostile environment for asylum seekers. And it's been the case for as long as I've been in this place. When I was first elected, the dawn raids that were being inflicted on asylum seekers in Glasgow were a national controversy. And even then, there were those who argued we need a robust asylum system. What we need is an asylum system that is designed to give asylum, to give refuge to everyone who needs it. What we have instead is an asylum system that is designed to turn away the maximum number possible and to make the experience so humiliating, so degrading and so frightening that it acts as a deterrent. That's the asylum system that we have, and that has continued to work in that way under successive governments. But I would contrast that with the response that we so often see from members of the public. Even after decades of anti-migrant propaganda coming from so much of the political and media landscape in this country, in every community you will find groups of people banding together, reaching out to one another to find ways to help and to support asylum seekers in their communities. And whether that was in the days of those dawn raids I mentioned, where local communities would gather outside an asylum seeker's flat to protect them, to keep them in, when the Home Office officials came to try and take them out, or whether more recently it was the likes of the astonishing display of solidarity that we saw at Kenmure Street in Glasgow. The human instinct to help and to recognise another human being's desperation is still strong. It's innate with us, and it's so strong that it hasn't been demolished by those decades of anti-migrant propaganda. Most people understand that while the right like to portray hosting asylum seekers as some kind of burden for the nation, most people understand that that's not what bearing a burden is. To be asked for asylum, to be in a position to be able to help, that is what it is to have privilege in this world. The person who has to flee, who has to act out of desperation and ask strangers for help, that's what it is to bear a burden. The UK Government, of course, must be under pressure to change direction, but the Scottish Government can and must do more as well. And I hope that the Minister, in responding, will lay out an expansive and an ambitious approach to implementing, to the maximum degree possible, everything that we possibly can do to end destitution in Scotland. Migration will always be part of the human story, and it should be something that enriches us and makes us proud instead of the shame that this issue brings us.
Thank you very much indeed. Before calling the next speaker, I'm conscious of the number of colleagues who still wish to participate and therefore minded to accept the motion without notice under Rule 8.14.3 to extend the debate by up to 30 minutes, and I invite Maggie Chapman to move such a motion.
Very happy to move that motion. Thank you.
The motion is moved. Are members agreed that the debate should be extended by up to 30 minutes? That is agreed. I call Faisal Chowdhury to be followed by Evelyn Tweed. Up to 4 minutes, Mr Chowdhury.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I congratulate Maggie Chapman on bringing this important issue to the Chamber. The current system we have to prevent destitution and homelessness are by no means perfect, but far better than those who have no resources to public funds or NRPF, who are being forced into destitution by a system which completely overlooks them. People with NRPF include students, asylum seekers and EU citizens without leave to remain. Many have contributed to our economy through taxes or tuition fees, yet they cannot access many benefits or services, including homelessness support. They also pay a surcharge to use our NHS, which is something 150% of the cost of care. I have met students who pay large tuition fees that support our universities, who were forced to take out loans to pay for healthcare. Destitution by design outlines the ways NRPF has contributed to destitution and its ongoing effects. Those with NRPF and experiencing destitution are 6 times more likely to be slipping rough than other destitute groups. A third who accessed Fairway Scotland's support had no weekly income at all. They are 8.5 times more likely to use A&E, costing the taxpayer money. The report even outlines the horrific case of survivor of domestic abuse unable to get the homelessness support. I met with Shakti Amanzaid, Edinburgh, who provides support for those with NRPF fleeing abusive situation, including safe accommodation and befriending services. These services are so important, but will not be available across Scotland, and subject to Shakti continuing to receive grant funding. Members must recognise that any system which delivers these outcomes is not working for anyone. While the power to make great changes to NRPF is reserved, Scotland can and should be taking action. The roadmap for policymakers outline ways that can happen. The first is bus scheme. My colleague Paul Sweeney has done a great work in pushing for that for asylum seekers, but we know half of these seeking support for destitution are not asylum seekers. And bringing unable to travel means missing job interviews, immigration interviews or medical appointments. The report also recommends the expansion of Fairway Scotland or the establishment of Crisis Fund. Given the Scottish Government already grants funding to organisations which provide crisis funds for those with NRPF, we should be looking at simply the system and create a single point of access across the country. Ultimately, major changes to the rules are for the UK Government, but we must elevate the harm caused by the policy by fully funding local authorities, an organisation which supports some of these most vulnerable people in our society. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Chowdhury. And I call Evelyn Tweed to be followed by Paul Sweeney. Up to 4 minutes, Ms Tweed.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and thank you to my colleague and friend Maggie Chapman for bringing this debate today. And I completely agree with Maggie Chapman. There is no evidence that hostile environment policies, including no recourse to public funds, have achieved the aims that they were designed to. But we can be certain that they have made the lives of many people very, very hard indeed. People from across the world bring so much to our country. We are all the richer for their presence on so many levels. In Scotland, we recognise this. There are incredible organisations across Scotland doing amazing work to support those with no recourse to public funds or restricted eligibility. In my own constituency, Forth Valley Welcome helps families integrate and build networks. They advocate to make sure those seeking sanctuary can access the services that they need. The Central Scotland Regional Equality Council provides support and advice for people who need assistance accessing public services. They also work to prevent social isolation and help build capacity in community groups. In 2023-24, the Fairway Scotland Partnership, which aims to prevent and mitigate destitution among those with no recourse to public funds, supported over 1,000 people. Researchers from Heriot-Watt carried out studies alongside this, and virtually all of those surveyed were experiencing homelessness. Virtually all of them were destitute, and average incomes were exceptionally low and usually under £40 a week. The research also showed that in some cases, caseworkers were able to unlock access to essential support almost immediately. This is support to which people had been entitled but were unable to access for long periods. Sometimes services will require proof of receipt of universal credit as a shortcut to ensuring recipients are low income. As people with no recourse to public funds can access benefits, they are excluded from other services that they are eligible for, such as free school meals. Making considerations of the impact on no recourse to public funds central to service design will allow these unintended exclusions to be avoided. This is an opportunity for stakeholders across all levels to collaborate and make some real positive change. As the report highlights, services for people with no recourse to public funds cross several overlapping, devolved and reserved policy areas. Legal interventions by the UK Government are unpredictable and highly politicised, and thus cannot be relied upon as a bellwether. The Home Office sets the list of public funds. The list can be changed as and when, with no requirement for consultation. This includes benefits administered here in Scotland. The Scottish Government has already engaged with the UK Government regarding removing the Scottish Welfare Fund from the list. This would allow decisions about crisis grant eligibility to be made here in Scotland. I asked the Minister, as suggested in the report, to ask I asked the Minister to, as suggested in the report, to ask Westminster to commit to a clear and transparent public funds guidance. The most effective way of alleviating poverty and the risk of destitution is to put money in the hands of those who need it.
Need to conclude.
Access to the mainstream benefit system would be transformational, and to restrict access to benefits is a political choice.
Thank you very much indeed. I now call the final speaker in the open debate, Paul Sweeney, up to 4 minutes. Mr Sweeney.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. It's a pleasure to be able to contribute to this evening's debate, and I commend Ms Chapman, Member for North East Scotland, for bringing this motion for members' business. And indeed, it's great to see Beth Watts-Combe and Jen Ang in the gallery, and thank them for their excellent research and that of their colleagues, and I think it really informs the public debate in Scotland, as we heard so ably last night at the cross-party group on migration, where these issues were discussed at some length. And it really is a multifaceted challenge, one of the biggest public health policy challenges in Scotland today. And indeed, as has been mentioned by members across the chamber this evening, one largely by design, which is a real moral stain on our country, and one we really need to look at dealing with. No recourse to public funds is something I'm very familiar with, given that I represent, or certainly as an MP and as an MSP, 95% of people seeking asylum in Scotland, in Glasgow, with the balance being distributed to other local authorities in Scotland since 2022, when the dispersal area was expanded. It is a major issue in Glasgow, I'm sure as the Minister is aware as a member in the city as well, and one that we have to contend with in a number of ways. One of the big challenges, of course, is the arbitrary nature of adding to the no recourse to public funds, and that creates a chilling effect. It's not simply the list of prescribed funds, it's the fact that there's a culture of prohibition that has crept in across public authorities around NRPF. There's many unlawful gatekeepers out there, many people acting beyond acting ultra vires to prevent people accessing services. We hear it, for example, from GPs when they're referring patients on to social services which are not being given to them. That is unlawful. We need to take greater action across all public services in Scotland to make it clear what the line is on NRPF, where it is and where it isn't, and what can be accessed, because there's a lot of confusion out there, either deliberate or just purely ignorance. We need to make that guidance much clearer across every level of government in Scotland. I would also encourage, and I certainly associate myself with all 5 of the recommendations, but I think certainly since the change in government, there is an opportunity to look at how we ameliorate the effects of no recourse to public funds, and I think there would be common cause on this side of the chamber, as well as with colleagues in the House of Commons, to try and remove some of these funds from the NRPF list, and indeed if there were new discrete funds created, that they wouldn't be countered proactively by the Home Office. I think it's worth testing that position, and I think there would be a willingness to ally ourselves in that regard. For example, I know one of the effects that was concerning ministers in relation to introducing free bus travel for people seeking asylum was the risk of the Home Office then interdicting it with NRPF. I don't think that's a live risk now. I'd like to maybe create a hostage to fortune in saying so, but I think it is opportunity now for the government to introduce that through a statutory instrument, and that would allow a more systemic approach to delivering that benefit to people in the asylum system. I also want to turn very quickly to the interface of the asylum system and our housing crisis in Glasgow. As members in the city will be aware, councillors declared a housing emergency in November 2023. We have seen a vast increase in the number of people who have been granted leave to remain, then presenting as homeless in Glasgow. I believe there's been a 96% increase in the last couple of years, which has presented severe pressures on housing in the city. The number of homeless applications by refugees in the city is currently standing, as of December, at 2,753. And the number of households in temporary accommodation of refugees is 2,179. I urge the Minister to consider how we can expand housing capacity in Glasgow. We have 2,600 long-term empty homes in Glasgow. We can make a greater effort in that regard. Join up the policies. Look again at the asylum housing contracts. How do we take that money from multinational rent seekers and push it into housing investment? We can restructure this in a way which is positive and beneficial. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Sweeney. I now call Kokab Stewart to respond to the debate. Minister, around 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I would like to thank Maggie Chapman for bringing this motion to the Chamber, and she started with very powerful testimonial words from those with that direct experience, and I thank her for bringing their voices to the heart of the Chamber tonight. She noted the recent publication of the legal briefing, as do I, Ending Destitution in Scotland, a roadmap for policy makers. I welcome the breadth of the report and many of the recommendations that it makes. It is absolutely right that we continue to challenge ourselves to ensure that we are doing everything we can to reduce destitution in Scotland. Fairway Scotland have sent me a copy of the briefing to me, and I will be responding to them in full very shortly. So, far from failing to act, in 2021 the Scottish Government published our pioneering Ending Destitution Together strategy in partnership with COSLA, and many colleagues have referred to that tonight. It is the first of its kind in the UK and sets out our inclusive approach to improving and strengthening support provision and service access for people subject to NRPF in Scotland. Our powers are limited, however, and nationality and immigration, including the no recourse to public funds policy, are wholly reserved to the UK Parliament. As much as we would like to, we are unable to end destitution for all overnight. We can, however, continue to deliver services and work in partnership with organisations across Scotland and continue to legislate where we have the power to do so and raise issues with the UK Government where we don't. We do this to ensure implementation of our vision that no one in Scotland is forced into destitution and everyone has their human rights protected regardless of their immigration status. A wee bit about financial support. Since 2021, we have invested over £500,000 each year to support the most destitute in Scotland. Between 2021 and 24, funding was provided to the British Red Cross to deliver the Scottish Crisis Fund. This pilot project provided people with emergency crisis cash support and was inclusive of people who had no recourse to public funds. Learning from this project showed that some people accessing the fund could access other public funds but needed casework support to exercise their rights and access appropriate services. So, building on this learning, since June 24, we have been working with Fairway Scotland on delivery of a project that provides both cash support and casework to those who are most in need. This holistic support package is assisting people to exercise their right to public funds, including housing, helping people with emergency cash, to support tackling food insecurity, enabling access to culturally appropriate foods and essential needs. Since July 2024, over 400 people have been supported out of destitution. So, for some time, we have been lobbying the UK Government to remove the Scottish Welfare Fund from the restricted public funds list. If people subjected to NRPF in Scotland were able to access this emergency crisis cash support, it would provide an additional safety net to mitigate destitution. We will continue to call for this and indeed for all schemes that are created using devolved powers to be able to determine their own eligibility requirements. I will.
Maggie Chapman.
I'm grateful to the Minister for taking my intervention. I wonder, would she also consider, given that the Welfare Fund is currently on that list, exploring setting up a new crisis fund that has the specific aims of reaching those in destitution?
Minister.
I thank Maggie Chapman for that, I can understand why she's asking for it, but I would refer her to paragraph 6 of the UK immigration rules, which includes, and I quote, a payment made from a welfare fund under the Welfare Funds Scotland Act of 2015. So this is why people subject to NRPF cannot access the Scottish Welfare Fund, and we could not create a new fund under this Act to support people while it remains on the public fund list defined by the UK Government. But as I said to her, I would reassure her that we continue, and I continue, to robustly lobby the UK Government to act in these areas. I'll go on to the next steps for us. As the report highlights, there is more that can be done, and we've been working closely with COSLA, stakeholders, third sector organisations and local authorities to review the delivery of the Ending Destitution Together strategy and develop a work plan for the phase 2 of delivery. The vision and principles of the strategy are as relevant today as the day that they were published. However, the feedback has been that understanding the NRPF condition and eligibility isn't always clear for frontline workers. And members, including Carol Mochan, made that point about the opaqueness. As a priority, prior to the publication of the strategy, we developed migrants' rights and entitlements guidance in partnership with COSLA and have updated that guidance as well as providing training. This aims to support local authorities when making support decisions, and we want to ensure it remains up to date and accessible for people. We will also work with Public Health Scotland, GP networks and other frontline workers to improve understanding and awareness of NRPF and the eligibilities of people and how to support them better. I will, yes.
Briefly, Paul Sweeney.
I thank the Minister for giving way. She's been very generous with her time. I note the point she's making about extending advice to public authorities. That's very welcome. And she mentioned the point about removing existing benefits from the list. But if there were a new piece of legislation, even emergency legislation, to counter the very extreme destitution of less than £40 a week, some people, to actually introduce that now, it would need the proactive measure of the Home Office or the UK Government to actually interdict that, and it's unlikely. Could the Minister perhaps look to test that in the near future?
Minister.
Thank you for raising that, and I will give that consideration. Thank you, Mr Sweeney, for that. I'm going to try my best to respond to a few of the points that were raised. Far too many shows the interest of in this debate. I was glad to hear that Tim Eagle raised the issue about treating people with dignity, but I wonder how he feels about the hostile environment that was created under the previous government, and that somewhat undermines that statement. And of course Evelyn Tweed, Marie McNair, other colleagues have pointed out that hostile environments don't achieve the aim that they are intended to achieve. Richard Leonard, apologies. Richard Leonard made a compelling case for support and he made that challenge also to the Labour government in Westminster, who could act in the areas of reserved competence. And I assure him that I'm doing everything I can. And it's good to see that there is cross-party support on that. Also, I would like to refer to Emma Roddick, who highlighted the limitations that were placed upon this place, and I refer to the legislation that I did. So, in closing, Presiding Officer, I have welcomed this debate. I have listened very carefully, and I thank Jen Ang for bringing this report, and to Maggie Chapman for raising this debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. That concludes the debate, and I close this meeting of Parliament.